Have you ever wondered how a seemingly simple system of territorial division was able to shape destinies, consolidate empires, and transform wild territories into organized civilizations? Many believe that hereditary captaincies arose directly as a strategy to protect Brazil from foreign invasions in the 16th century. But the truth is that this idea has much older and, perhaps, even more ambitious roots. Let's go back in time, to a time when the world was still a puzzle of mysteries and unfinished maps. We are at the beginning of the 15th century. Portugal, a small European kingdom, had big dreams. Under the command of Infante Dom Henrique, the navigator, the country began to explore the vast unknown beyond the waters of the Atlantic. The coast of Africa, full of riches and mysteries, was the main target. But here, a dilemma arises: how to organize and control such distant lands, especially when these lands still needed to be discovered and colonized. Dom Henrique, known for his strategic genius, found an innovative solution: divide and conquer. It was in this context that the seed of what years later would be known as the system of hereditary captaincies was born. But the starting point was not Brazil, but a small island in the middle of the Atlantic, Porto Santo. Imagine the scene. Two young sea captains, João Gonçalves Zarco and Tristão Vaz Teixeira, faced days of storms and rough seas. Their mission was to map the African coast, but the winds took them to an unexpected destination. In 1418, they spotted dry land, a small but promising island, which they named Porto Santo. This would be the beginning of a revolution in the way Portugal would deal with its new territorial possessions. When they returned to Portugal with the news of the discovery, Dom Henrique saw a unique opportunity. He ordered the captains to return, this time accompanied by Bartolomeu Perestrelo, to begin colonization. But how to organize a completely virgin territory, where everything, from housing to cultivation, had to start from scratch? That's when the idea of designating donatary captains, responsible for the administration and exploitation of the land on behalf of the crown, arose. Shortly afterwards, the same navigators discovered another island, even larger and richer, Madeira. Unlike Porto Santo, Madeira was full of natural resources, especially hardwood, which gave it its name. Dom Henrique decided to use the island as a testing ground for his new administrative model. In 1420, the first settlers arrived, and 5 years later, King João I made Madeira official as a Portuguese province, giving Dom Henrique the task of organizing it. The system was clear. Each region would be divided into parcels called captaincies, and the Doni captains would be responsible for attracting settlers, distributing land, and developing the local economy. In return, they could profit from exploiting the land. It was a model that combined administrative efficiency with the personal ambition of the grantees, a formula that promised to transform any piece of land into a piece of Portugal. The first official hereditary captaincy was established in 1440 in the Machico region on Madeira Island. Tristão Vaz Teixeira received the mission of managing it, while Bartolomeu Perestrelo was given the captaincy of Porto Santo, created 6 years later. These men were not just administrators, they were pioneers. They faced unimaginable challenges, from deforestation to make room for plantations to pirate attacks and unknown tropical diseases. Their every success and failure would be a lesson for future generations. But the real innovation was in the idea of heredity. By making captaincies hereditary properties, Portugal guaranteed administrative continuity and encouraged grantees to invest in the long term. After all, they were not only building for themselves, but also for their descendants. If you think this was all just an economic move, you're wrong. The creation of captaincies was not just about agriculture or colonization. It was about power. Each colonized piece of land consolidated the Portuguese presence in a strategic region, protecting it from rival powers such as Spain and later France. Madeira, for example, became one of the largest sugar producers at the time, while Porto Santo served as a base for even more daring expeditions. But there was another fascinating aspect to this system. It was highly experimental. Dom Henrique and his successors adjusted the rules as they learned from mistakes and successes. It was this spirit of adaptation that allowed the captaincy model to evolve and become so effective. At the end of the 15th century, the system of hereditary captaincies was already consolidated in Portugal and its Atlantic islands. But no one could have predicted that, within a few years, he would be taken to a much larger and more challenging territory, South America. Before that, however, the captaincies would be put to the test in other regions, such as the Azores and Cape Verde, where they would face new obstacles and further refine their structure. And this is where an intriguing question arises. How did such an innovative administrative model survive adversity and adapt to such diverse scenarios? What led the Portuguese to trust this system so much, to the point of implementing it in immense and unknown lands like Brazil? The answer is in the next chapter of this story, where we will see how the captaincies took their first steps towards the New World. The journey of the hereditary captaincies was just beginning, but the challenges they would face in Brazil would be much greater than any storm faced in the Atlantic. After all, how to divide and govern such a vast and unexplored territory. Discover how this strategy was put into practice and the first surprising results of this ambitious bet in the next part. Have you ever thought about how decisions made on small, isolated pieces of land can shape the fate of an entire empire? For the 15th century Portuguese, the islands of Madeira, the Azores, and Cape Verde were more than just conquered lands. They were living laboratories where a revolutionary idea was being tested: hereditary captaincies. Here, amid unexpected challenges and stories of overcoming, the model that would transform Brazil and other colonies around the world was born. Imagine the incessant sound of Atlantic waves crashing against the shores of an island covered in dense forests. This was Madeira at the beginning of its colonization. In 1420, when the first settlers arrived, the idea of transforming this wild paradise into a center of wealth seemed almost impossible. Tristão Vaz Teixeira, one of the first grantee captains, had the mission of leading this challenge. To many, he was just an administrator. For the island's inhabitants, he was the difference between success and failure. Soon, Madeira became a symbol of ambition. With the help of settlers brought mainly from the Algarve, work began to cut down the trees and prepare the soil for the cultivation of a crop that would change the economic history of the region: sugarcane. This was not just an agricultural effort, but a strategic operation. The sugar produced there began to supply Europe, placing Portugal at the forefront of international trade. Madeira then became proof that the captaincy system could transform a remote territory into an essential part of an empire. While Madeira prospered, the Azores presented a new kind of challenge. Discovered around 1427, these islands seemed inhospitable at first glance. Strong winds, constant rain, and soil that needed a lot of work to become fertile were the main obstacles. But for Flemish navigator Jacques de Bruges, who was awarded the captaincy of Terceira Island, these challenges were just the beginning of an opportunity. Unlike Madeira, the Azores did not immediately become an agricultural center. Jacques realized that the key to success lay in social organization. He brought settlers prepared to deal with climatic adversities and developed a Sesmaria system, which distributed land in a way that guaranteed productivity. With this, the Azores became an example of how captaincies could be adapted to different realities. More than that, they showed that resistance and adaptation were fundamental characteristics for success. While Madeira and the Azores were consolidating their bases, Cape Verde brought another element to the captaincy system: the connection with the African continent. Discovered in the mid-15th century, the archipelago was strategically located near the coast of Guinea. This made it a central point in Atlantic trade, especially in the slave trade, which was beginning to become a profitable activity for Europeans. Cape Verde was divided into several captaincies, and the grantees faced different challenges. Constant drought was an implacable enemy, but the island's real asset was their geographical position. There, the captaincy system proved to be more than an administrative model. It became a tool for integration between colonies. It was in Cape Verde that navigators, traders, and settlers met to plan their next ventures. An emblematic example is the settlement of Ribeira Grande, which became the beating heart of the archipelago and a key player in Portuguese maritime expansion. What makes these stories so fascinating is how they reflect universal challenges. Who has never had to start something from scratch, facing seemingly insurmountable uncertainties and obstacles? Just like grantee captains, we all have moments when we need to make difficult decisions, often without the certainty that they will work out. Tristan Vaz Teixeira, Jacome de Bruges, and the captains of Cape Verde were ordinary people with ambitions and fears who used the tools they had to transform the impossible into reality. This is the true essence of hereditary captaincies. They are not just a piece of distant history. They are a reminder that with vision, hard work, and resilience, even the most arid of terrains can bear fruit. When we look at these archipelagos today, it is impossible not to see the marks left by this system. The economy, culture, and even geography of these islands have been shaped by decisions made centuries ago. Madeira, with its sugarcane plantations, the Azores with their resilience in the face of unpredictable weather, and Cape Verde with their strategic connection, all of them are living examples of the impact of hereditary captaincies. However, the greatest legacy of this system was yet to come. With the learnings obtained in these Atlantic laboratories, Portugal was ready to take the next step, applying the model on a much larger scale and in an even more challenging territory. Brazil would become the new stage for this audacious experiment. Now that you know the behind the scenes of this fascinating system, have you ever stopped to think about how it influenced the history of places that we consider common today? Madeira, Azores, and Cape Verde are not just tourist destinations. They are living pieces of a history of courage and innovation. If you found this trip down memory lane as engaging as I did, be sure to show your support. Like this video and share with anyone you think will be surprised by these stories. And of course, subscribe to the channel to continue exploring historical themes as intriguing as this one. In the next video, you will see how this system was brought to Brazil and how it faced challenges that put even the best structured plans to the test. Remember, every like and subscription helps keep the flame of curiosity and learning alive. And this is a mission that we can only accomplish together. Until then, a big hug, and until the next chapter of this fascinating story. Have you ever stopped to think about how a system born on small islands in the Atlantic was transported to a gigantic and wild territory like Brazil? The arrival of the hereditary captaincies in the New World is a story full of daring, failures, and unexpected twists. What seemed like an efficient solution for territorial control quickly turned into an extreme test of resilience and adaptation. Today, we will explore how this system was implemented in Brazil, its first achievements, and the challenges that almost made it collapse. When the Portuguese first saw the Brazilian coast in 1500, their enthusiasm was immediate. But the question soon arose: how to control such a vast land, inhabited by indigenous peoples, and still guarantee its economic exploitation in a world where European powers competed fiercely for territories? The answer seemed obvious: use the model already tested in the Atlantic archipelagos. In 1534, King João III decided to divide Brazil into 15 hereditary captaincies, donating them to 12 grantees, men trusted by the crown, who would assume the role of leaders in the settlement and administration of the territory. But would what worked so well on small islands also work on a territory the size of a continent? This question still resonates as one of the greatest historical dilemmas. Among those chosen to lead the captaincies were military personnel, nobles, and experienced merchants. Men like Martim Afonso de Sousa, Grante of the captaincy of São Vicente, and Duarte Coelho, who received Pernambuco, had clear missions: colonize, explore natural resources, and protect the territory against invaders. In return, they received the right to exploit the riches of the land and pass them on as inheritance to their descendants. However, many of these men faced challenges that not all military or administrative experience could predict. The distance between Brazil and Portugal, indigenous resistance, lack of resources, and even rivalries between the grantees themselves quickly turned the mission into a fight for survival. How would you deal with being responsible for a land where everything, from security to cultivation, depended solely on your decisions? While most captaincies faced difficulties, Pernambuco stood out as a success story. Duarte Coelho, with his strategic vision and ability to negotiate with local indigenous peoples, managed to establish one of the first solid economic centers in Brazil. He introduced sugarcane cultivation, using indigenous and later slave labor to transform Pernambuco into an economic power. The sugar produced there not only generated profits for the Portuguese crown, but also put Brazil on the map of international trade. Duarte Coelho proved that, with leadership and planning, hereditary captaincies could work. But why didn't other captaincies follow the same path? Of the initial 15 captaincies, only 2, Pernambuco and São Vicente, managed to prosper. The others faced a devastating combination of mismanagement, indigenous attacks, and isolation. Captaincies such as Porto Seguro and Ilhéus suffered constant attacks, both from local tribes and French pirates, while the lack of communication with the crown left the grantees without support. Imagine the scene: a grantee surrounded by impenetrable forests, without reinforcements, without weapons, and with the constant threat of attacks. Many abandoned their captaincies, leaving them at the mercy of chaos. The brilliant idea of hereditary captaincies seemed to be falling apart. And that was when the Portuguese crown realized that something needed to change. In 1548, just 14 years after the division of the territory, King João III established the general government, centralizing the administration of Brazil. Tomé de Souza, the first governor-general, was sent to Brazil with a new plan: establish a central government in Salvador and unite the efforts of the captaincies under a single leadership. But this change brought a new conflict: how to unify such different interests and restore order without alienating the grantees who were still fighting for their lands. This was the new crossroads, and the solution required more than just military force. It required diplomacy and a new administrative vision. Despite their failures, the hereditary captaincies left an important legacy. They laid the foundations for the model of economic exploitation that would sustain colonial Brazil for centuries. More than that, they revealed the weaknesses and challenges of governing such a diverse territory. They were, in a sense, a live experiment that taught the crown how to manage its colonies. But the biggest lesson may be in the contrast. While Pernambuco showed what was possible with visionary leadership, captaincies like Porto Seguro revealed the dangers of a system without adequate support. This duality still resonates, raising a thought-provoking question: was the failure of the hereditary captaincies a failure of the system or of the people who implemented it? And you, what do you think? Was it the hereditary captaincies model that didn't work, or circumstances that prevented it from reaching its potential in Brazil? Leave your opinion in the comments. Let's explore the nuances of this fascinating story together. And of course, if you're enjoying this dive into history, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is essential so that we can continue to unravel the mysteries of our past. Sign up now and activate the bell so you don't miss the next chapter, where we will explore how the general government transformed Brazil and gave rise to the model that would consolidate the colony. We can't wait to share these stories with you. Until then, Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire system, carefully designed to govern vast territories, begins to fall apart? This was the scenario of colonial Brazil in the late 1540s. The hereditary captaincies, which seemed like a brilliant solution to administer the colony, were proving insufficient. The failure of most of them paved the way for a radical change in the way the Portuguese crown controlled its largest overseas territory. Today, we will explore the end of the hereditary captaincies system and the transition to the general government model, a milestone that changed the course of colonial Brazil. At first, the idea seemed foolproof. Dividing Brazil into 15 captaincies, handing them over to influential grantees, and allowing them to govern in the name of the crown was a logical strategy. After all, the crown did not have the resources to directly administer such a vast territory. But reality soon set in. From natural challenges to tensions with indigenous peoples, grantees faced obstacles that no governance manual could predict. For example, in the captaincy of Porto Seguro, the grantees were faced with fierce resistance from the Pataxo and Tupiniquim indigenous peoples. Without sufficient military support and with scarce resources, the colonizers struggled to survive, much less prosper. In other captaincies, such as Ilhéus and Itamaracá, French pirates invaded the coasts, looting villages and hindering any attempt at territorial consolidation. It was constant chaos. But why exactly did the captaincies fail? The answer is not just external challenges. Many grantees were simply not prepared for the complexities of administration. While figures like Duarte Coelho from Pernambuco prospered with well-planned strategies, others proved incapable of managing the administration and security of their lands. It was as if each captaincy lived its own reality, some flourishing, others withering. This inequality made the system unsustainable. The collapse did not go unnoticed. For the Portuguese crown, Brazil was too valuable to be abandoned to failure. The threat from other European powers, especially France and Spain, made more direct and effective control essential. It was then that, in 1548, King João III made a decision that would forever change the history of the colony, to establish the general government. This decision was, in many ways, a leap in the dark. There were no guarantees that centralizing power in a single governor would solve the problems, but the urgency was evident. Thus, Tomé de Souza, an experienced military man and loyal to the crown, was chosen as the first Governor-General of Brazil. Its mission was clear: to unify the captaincies, establish a central government in Salvador, and create the foundations for efficient administration. Tomé de Souza arrived in Brazil in 1549 with a team of approximately 1,000 men. Among them were Jesuit priests, such as Manuel da Nóbrega, who would play a crucial role in the conversion and pacification of indigenous peoples. It was an entourage prepared to deal with the unexpected. One of Tomé's first actions was to found the city of Salvador, which would become the seat of the general government. Strategically located in the Bahia de Todos os Santos, Salvador was chosen not only for its geographical position, but also for its defense capacity against maritime attacks. The city symbolized the consolidation of Portuguese power in Brazil. Tomé de Souza's strategy involved integrating the captaincies under a central administration. Donatarios still maintained some local control, but were now subordinate to the Governor-General. This brought stability to the system, allowing the crown to establish clear orders and coordinate efforts, such as building fortresses and organizing military expeditions to protect the territory. The impact of the general government was immediate. Salvador quickly transformed into an administrative and economic center. The city attracted settlers, traders, and religious people, becoming the base for Portuguese expansion. Furthermore, the centralized model helped to contain French invasions, which had become a constant problem on the Brazilian coast. The construction of fortifications and the creation of local militias reinforced the security of the territory. However, not everything was rosy. Centralization also brought new conflicts. Many grantees were unwilling to cede power to the governor-general, which generated internal tensions. Furthermore, relationships with indigenous peoples remained problematic, even with the Jesuits' efforts to establish peaceful missions. If we pause here, it is impossible not to reflect on the impact of this transition. Imagine living in a territory where the government is so far away that each village seems to have its own rules. Now, think about the arrival of a central government, which brings organization, but also demands obedience. For many colonists and grantees, this change was a relief. For others, a loss of freedom. What would be your reaction to seeing your autonomy being absorbed by a greater power? Although the system of hereditary captaincies lost its strength, it did not disappear completely. Instead, it was integrated into the general government model. The captaincies continued to exist, but now subordinated to a central administration. This balance between decentralization and centralization was essential for the success of Portuguese colonization. Furthermore, the general government model proved to be so efficient that it was replicated in other Portuguese colonies, such as Angola. Brazil became a laboratory for the Portuguese crown, which learned from its mistakes and successes, adjusting its policies in other territories. The end of the hereditary captaincies marked the beginning of a new era for Brazil. The transition to general government not only saved the colony from collapse, but also laid the foundation for the development of a territory that would one day become one of the largest countries in the world. And now, how about continuing this journey with us? If you enjoyed exploring this story full of twists, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Every like and subscription is essential so that we can bring more content like this. In the next chapter, we will delve even deeper into the evolution of colonial Brazil, exploring how decisions made at that time continue to influence our country to this day. Activate the bell so you don't miss any updates. Until then, a hug, and thank you for being part of this historic journey with us. We have reached the end of this journey, but before closing, we need to answer an essential question. What really remains of the hereditary captaincy system? Was it a brilliant idea that didn't work out, or a fundamental piece in the construction of Brazil as we know it today? The answer lies in a fascinating balance point. The system was both an administrative failure and a structural basis that shaped our territory, our economy, and even the way we organize ourselves socially. Now, let's explore how this legacy lives, often hidden, in our cities, cultures, and forms of government. Looking back, the hereditary captaincies may seem like a chaotic system, but it is undeniable that they played a crucial role. By transferring responsibility to grantees, the crown managed to populate the Brazilian coast, establish the first villages, and create a basic structure for the colonial economy. Without this, it is likely that Brazil would have been dominated by other European powers. On the other hand, the failure of most captaincies revealed the limits of this model. The lack of direct support from the crown, the challenging conditions of the territory, and conflicts with indigenous peoples made life in the captaincies almost unsustainable. This mix of successes and failures created valuable lessons that directly influenced the transition to general government. If you look at the map of Brazil today, you will see marks left by the hereditary captaincies. Many current states, such as Pernambuco, Bahia, and São Paulo, have their roots in territorial divisions created in the 16th century. Even the logic of population concentration on the coast reflects the impact of the captaincies. Although the model changed over time, it defined where and how Brazil would begin to grow. But what about the marks that are not visible on the map? Captaincies have also shaped the way we deal with power and decentralization. Brazil has always faced a delicate balance between central power and regional autonomies, something that can be traced back to the colonial period. The history of captaincies teaches us that great ideas need to be adaptable. When the system was brought to Brazil, it seemed promising, but its flaws exposed the importance of planning, support, and a more integrated vision. This leads us to reflect: how many modern systems face the same dilemmas? Whether in politics, the economy, or society, the lesson of captaincies is clear. Success depends as much on the structure as on the people who operate it. Now, look around you. How many times have you seen incredible ideas fail because they weren't implemented correctly? The story of the Hereditary Captaincies is a powerful reminder that the best intentions need to be accompanied by solid strategies and flexibility to face the unexpected. Throughout this series, we travel from the islands of Madeira and Azores, where the system was born, to the villages of colonial Brazil, where it faced its greatest challenges. We saw heroes like Duarte Coelho transforming inhospitable lands into centers of prosperity, and we also witnessed the failures of captaincies that were unable to overcome their obstacles. This story isn't just about the past. It's about how we learn, adapt, and move forward. If you've made it this far, thank you for embarking on this journey with us. It's thanks to you that we can explore and share stories as fascinating as this. And now, we want to know, what else would you like to discover about colonial Brazil or other periods in our history? Leave your ideas in the comments. They are essential for us to continue building this channel together. If this video brought new perspectives to you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. These actions, which seem simple, make a huge difference and help bring this content to more people who, like you, love diving into history. And don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss the next chapters. We are already preparing new themes that will surprise you. In the next content, we will explore another fascinating facet of colonial Brazil: the transition from a society built for export to a nation that began to develop its own identity. It is a story of struggles, resistance, and transformations that shaped who we are today. Until then, a big hug. And once again, thank you for being part of this journey. See you in the next video.